This week we have been looking at the discipline of confession, and we began in Psalm 32, how David rejoiced in the fact that his confessed sin had been forgiven. He says, "Blessed is the man whose sin has been forgiven and whose transgressions the Lord has covered." And then on the following day, I think yesterday, Wednesday, we looked at the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector, and just how the tax collector, by virtue of confessing his guilt before God, is more justified in the eyes of God compared to the Pharisee who went about boasting and bragging of his moral standing before the Lord God. The Pharisee was saying, "God, wow is me, I'm good." But the tax collector was saying, "Woe is me, I'm guilty." And it is the prayer of the tax collector that the Lord hears. Today we are continuing that discipline of confession, and we'll be looking at it slightly from the angle of receiving confession. When a brother or sister comes to you in confession, how should we, handle it? How should we go about it? And our sharing is based on the very, very famous parable of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15. In Luke 15, when you open the Bible, the word says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering round to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" That is the context this is the context for all the three parables that Jesus will go about giving to the people, to just teach them that, hey, it is actually the lost, those who know that they are lost, that receive the grace of God, compared to the Pharisees and tax collectors who think they had it all together. And so that gives the context for the three parables. And when you go through the three parables, the parable of the lost coin, in the lost coin, it is one of 10 coins that gets lost. So it's a 10% loss. And then in the parable of the lost, in the parable, it begins with the lost sheep. It's 1 over 100. So the shepherd leaves the 99, goes for the one. That's a 1% loss. And then he talks about the lost coin, 1 of 10. That's 10% loss. The stakes are getting higher as Jesus gives this story and lesson, because when he gets to the third parable, which is the parable of the lost son, that's a 50% loss, because it begins, in fact, Luke records that Jesus continued. So it's actually a continuation. The lesson is ongoing. There was a man who had 2 sons. We know that. So it's a 50% loss, so we think, because one son goes away. He asks his father for the inheritance, goes and squanders it, wasting it with the prostitutes in another foreign, far country. It's a 50% loss. The elder brother stays home. He does everything that pleases his father. He obeys all the rules. And when the younger brother, of course, is far away, the Bible records in verse 17 of the book of Luke, chapter 15, he came to his senses. So he had this aha moment. He came to his senses. He came around and, has this conversation to himself. He talks to himself. Anajiita mkutano na anajiuliza, if the servants in my father's house have food to spare, how about me? So he puts together this confession that he rehearses and recites. He says, I will say this to my father. So he has this aha moment. He has an awakening. He comes to his senses. And then there's honesty, because he says, I will tell my dad I have sinned before you and before the heavens. And then there's action. He actually says, I will rise up and go. Aha. Awakening, honesty, and action. And yes, he does exactly what he tells himself to do. He goes back home. He goes to his father. You know the story. While he's still a long way off, the father sees him and does something that was very unheard of in the culture. He runs to him. For the father to run would mean he'd have, first of all, to lift up his tunic and now run. The legs of a man were not supposed to be seen in the Middle Eastern culture, in the ancient Middle Eastern culture. So when the father is, folding his tunic and running to his son, it's a very shameful, it's an embarrassing thing. Yet run he does. The son, of course, gives this recited confession, or apology to his father. Verse 21 The son says to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, he does not say to the son, he says to his servants, quick, get the best robe, bring the fattened calf and things like that. And the son is received back. Now you have to understand that in that culture, the firstborn, of course, by the principle of primogeniture, the firstborn son would get double the portion for all the rest. If the land is 100 acres, 50 will go to the firstborn son, and then the rest 50 will go to the rest of the children. The rest of the sons will share the remaining 50. So here, because he has two sons, it means the firstborn got 2/3 of the inheritance, while the younger one went and squandered a third. Okay? So if the father had 100 million, so let's say the elder brother gets 75, right? 2/3. And then these other one, okay, 60, 66, 67 million thereabouts. And then the younger son gets 33.5 million, goes and squanders it, 2/3. So the younger brother has gone and wasted a third. He's coming back. Everything that the father has at this point belongs to the elder brother. That's why when the father says to the elder brother, everything that I have is yours, he's actually meaning it. It is true. It's very, very literal. Everything that remains at home at this point belongs to the elder brother. Now, I want us to examine just briefly how the elder brother, responds to this whole issue. Verse 25, the elder son was in the field. He came to the house, heard music and dancing. There was a bash. So he called one of the servants and asked him, what's going on? And then the servant says, your brother has come. And the servant goes on, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. Of course, he does not take it well. The elder brother became angry and refused to go in. Does not want to take part in this bash, this wastage of resources. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours is so angry, he won't even call him his brother or by name. This son of yours is no longer his brother, he's this man's son. When this son of yours comes, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, you kill the fattened calf for him. The fattened calf, was kept for special occasions. When you have a special visitor in that culture, you get the fattened calf. Now here is someone who is coming back home, having wasted everything, and it is the fattened calf that is given to him. Why? First of all, we see a very strong sense of superiority in the attitude of the elder brother. He says, I never disobeyed you. I did everything. I followed your rules to the T and to the letter. Yet you never gave me even a goat to celebrate. There's that sense of superiority. Yet this son of yours, and he does not stop there, who has done what? Who has squandered his wealth, your wealth, with prostitutes, comes home. So he has this very strong sense of just superiority and his own moral record, how he has never disobeyed his father. He won't even mention his younger brother by name. Just says, this son of yours. Now, a quick lesson there is that sometimes someone will come to you in confidence, of course, and confess a sin or a struggle with you. As a believer, what usually do you do? Yeah? Do you always breach the trust? Do you break the confidence, or do you keep trust? Do you keep trust of this issue? Do you keep it between the two of you, or do you go about gossiping? It is unfortunate because even some men of cloth do that. A brother, for argument's sake, let's call this brother Obed. So Brother Obed shares a struggle with a pastor. The pastor says, as the pastor preaches, you hear the pastor saying, hey, even Brother Obed here has been struggling with such and such a sin, but God has healed him. God healed him. That doesn't really help. It doesn't build up. Brother Obed will probably never come back to church the following Sunday because he's wondering, Pasi, I thought it was between us. Ishafika kwa sermon illustration, and things like that. And sometimes that's how we act to our fellow believers and Christians. We break breach the trust. We break the confidence that they have had in us when they share their struggles. It's what the elder brother says. This guy has squandered your wealth with prostitutes, and then you are taking him in, right? That's a very strong sense of superiority. We think, yeah, I'm up there, and then this struggling one is down there. But you see, friends, it is very difficult to forgive someone when you feel superior to them. Even at home, as spouses, your partner shares this struggle with you. They open up, and now you weaponize that against them later. When we get in an argument now, you weaponize their weakness against them later. It's because you are feeling this sense of superiority, and it's impossible, it's almost difficult to forgive someone when you feel superior to him or to her. That is the elder brother. Another example in everyday life of this kind of thing is maybe you have a loved one who just has a certain type of addiction, or maybe is an alcoholic. By the way, the 5th step in the 12 steps of recovery for the alcoholics is called confession. In that step, you admit to God, to yourself, and to other people the exact nature of your wrongs. So say you have an alcoholic loved one. There's something that usually happens, a cycle. In fact, it's like a vicious cycle. Because every time when you're bailing out your loved one from the crazy things that they'll be doing, there's two things that our heart is, just by default, it has a proclivity to lean towards certain things. First of all, if it's your spouse and you are a woman, for example, you will feel self-pity. Yeah, Aki Woshe, you'll have this Woshe feeling. What did I do wrong? Yeah, you have self-pity. But beyond that, you have also self-righteousness. A self-righteousness. Because you keep on reminding this person of their sin. This is where uniangusha, you do this and wrong and all. And when that happens, self-pity and self-righteousness for me, towards my loved one who has this kind of struggle, what happens to them is that they will have a self-loathing. They will hate themselves. It's when you hear someone say, I can't forgive myself, they'll get to this position of self-loathing. And that will be part of why they are going back to drink. That will be part of why they will go back to indulge in their addiction. Because they can't even live with themselves when they are sober. So at least they have to take something to cope with that loathing, to cope with that hate. See how it's a vicious cycle. So you bail him out, you feel self-righteous, you're better than them, you feel self-pity, why? And then he feels, I'm just messing things up, I'm making him feel bad. I will go back so that at least I can also cope with this feeling of self-loath. It comes from this elder brother attitude that we tend to impose. Since we are better, we don't have these struggles. We think, no, this one is a problem. We think we are better than the others. You see, the story of the parable, of the prodigal son here ends in a suspense. It ends when we don't know if the elder brother ever entered into the feast. Because Jesus, by quoting the father, says, the father said of the son, this son of yours, this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. At whose expense was this younger brother welcomed back home? It was at the expense of the elder brother. Remember, he has squandered a third of the wealth that was given. His share is done for. He is coming back home, and the father is putting the signet ring on him, is giving him the best robe. The best robe would always be the robe of the man, the eldest man in that family. And so the best robe would probably have been the father's own robe. He clothes this prodigal guy with the best robe. He puts a ring on him. And then this guy is going again to share in his elder brother's wealth, the 2/3 that remain. Part of it will again be his inheritance. And no wonder maybe that's why the elder brother is angry. He has done his math. He knows, Maze, all the wealth that had remained here was mine. Now this guy has showed up again. Now we will eventually again have to share the wealth that is remaining. So it was at his cost, and he never liked it. It is as though Jesus is inviting the readers and the listeners of that time to crave for an elder brother. Because you see, for the 3 parables that he shares, the lost sheep, someone goes to look for the lost sheep. The lost coin, the woman actually sweeps the house to look for the lost coin. But for the lost son, notice no one goes to look for him. He brings himself home. Jesus has broken the pattern in his sharing, in his teaching. He's kind of making the readers crave for someone who will go after this younger brother and bring them back home. Now, of course, the elder brother would be expected to be the one going after his younger brother, but he didn't. In fact, he did not like it that the younger brother comes back home. Jesus is making us, the readers and the listeners and the hearers, to crave for a true elder brother, the perfect elder brother. Jesus is making the people, especially the Pharisees and tax collectors, to notice here that he's making the Pharisees and the scribes, the teachers of the law, to desire to see him as the true elder brother, to desire the very thing that the tax collectors and the sinners have desired by coming near Jesus. You see, this whole story points to Jesus as our true and elder brother. He's our true and elder brother. He's the one whom the Father strips of his robe of righteousness and puts on us. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. He became sin, he who knew no sin, so that we may become the righteousness of God. So God strips him of righteousness. God treats Jesus as an outcast on the cross so that we would be brought back to the family of God, will be brought back into the feast of the Father. It is Jesus who drinks the cup of the wrath of God, the wrath of eternal justice, so that those who believe in Jesus might drink from the cup of the Father's joy. Confession should be taken from a point of grace by you and I as believers. We should extend grace to others. In fact, when Paul is writing to the Corinthians in his second letter to them, in the Corinthian church there was a brother who had sinned, and so Paul had told them, get rid of that guy. Put him out of church for a while. And they had done just that. But after some time, Paul writes to them the second letter of Corinthians and tells them, please bring him back. Comfort that brother, forgive him, and bring him back, restore him. That is in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 5 to 11. And I like what he says at the end. At the end he says, please bring him back, in order that Satan may not outwit us. In order that Satan may not outwit us, for we are not ignorant of his schemes. Satan can either outwit us as Christians through self-loathing when we fall. When we fall into certain sins, we loathe ourselves to the point of not being able to receive the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Or Satan may outwit us through self-righteousness, where we think, you know what, I'm standing because I'm checking all the boxes. I'm doing all the things right. God must be very pleased and happy with me today than he was yesterday, because today I prayed for an hour. Yesterday I only spent, 15 minutes? Today I felt myself flowing. The moment I opened my mouth, words just came. I wondered where the prayer items were coming from. God must be pleased with me. We can easily fall into that trap of self-righteousness. Satan may outwit us. So when a brother comes to you, James 5:16, when a brother comes to confess to you, pray with them. Pray with them, lest Satan may outwit us. Pray with them also, that you may not fall into the same sin. Restore them gently, but also be cautious, lest you fall into the same sin. May the Lord help us not to have this elder brother spirit when the younger brother comes back, because the younger brother is a beneficiary of God's grace, just as you and I are beneficiaries of the grace of God. So may the Lord have mercy on us and give us this grace, and to extend to our brothers, to extend to our sisters, to extend to those around us. Because yes, we are a family of saints, but indeed we are also a fellowship of sinners. Amen.